Many people in England were quite surprised at how easily Barcelona managed to defeat Manchester United in the final of the Champions League. And I think the secret of it is in a small farmhouse on the edge of Barcelona, this place. It's called La Masia, and for some years now it's been the training school for Barcelona. And many of the team who won the European Championship have been playing together since they were fairly small boys, recruited by Barcelona, brought to La Masia and trained there. At any one time, there are 100 people, 100 young boys playing and training there day by day, doing their schoolwork together, living in the same place. It was all the idea of Johan Cruyff, who was one of Barcelona's great players and one of their best coaches as well. He'd seen at Ajax in Holland what could be done when you got hold of children when they were young enough and gave them a dream, made them feel that they too could be stars, that the future was theirs, that tomorrow, being a star, was not impossible because tomorrow was somehow here. You were already wearing the club shirt. You were already hobnobbing with the top people in the team. You were just dreaming of the day when you'd step onto the turf and take your place in the first team. Tomorrow was here already. And so La Masia has been producing stars for ages and ages and ages. And Cruyff started something which has now produced all kinds of world beaters. As you go into the dining room at La Masia, you see a plaque hanging above the doorway which says this in Catalan: with effort and sacrifice you can also make it, just do it, it is worth it. And there on the picture you see some of the great players and some of the top people in the history of the club. And so young boys from the start to believe tomorrow in a sense is here. They're already thinking Barcelona. They're already thinking victory. They're already thinking winning. And they're learning to fuse with one another and become tomorrow's team today. Tomorrow already here. If you look at the present squad, you will see an enormous number of the top players for whom it says youth system, youth system, youth system. They've been created by the club. And that's why they play so well together. It's why they believe in themselves so much. Because from the earliest years they've been trained in the idea that tomorrow you will be doing it too. Look at some of the greatest players on the side. The goalkeeper, Valdés, the great outfielders, Xavi and Iniesta, and down at the bottom there, the greatest player in the world at the moment probably, Lionel Messi. All products of the youth system, all brought up to believe tomorrow you'll be doing it because tomorrow has already started. This is Colditz, one of the most impregnable prison camps of the Second World War. Well, it was supposed to be. Actually, ironically, there were more escapes from Colditz than anywhere else. Why? Because it was a specially secure place where they took prisoners of war who had already tried to escape. But because of the people that they took there, escape attempts went on all the time. Here's a picture of some of the people, the difficult prisoners of war, who kept on trying to escape from Colditz. The man third from the left is Paddy Reed, and he is the first man ever to escape from the fortress. He did it naked. He got over the Swiss border somehow without his clothes. It was known as the naked escape, and he set the standard for others to follow after him. And even at the end of the war, there were escape attempts in progress, which never actually had to be carried out, because people in the fortress were just dreaming of the day when they could get away and be free once again. And I was just thinking, watching a programme about it last week, that it must have been weird being one of those escape attempt prisoners on the day before the escape. You'd be walking around the fortress looking to all intents and purposes as if it was just a normal day, as if you were just here now. But in your thoughts, you'd be elsewhere. In your mind, it would be tomorrow. And you'd be thinking about, would your fake credentials work? Would the passport get you over the border? Did you have the maps you needed? How well did you speak German? Could you pass yourself off as a normal person? And you'd be living the experiences of the next day. Tomorrow, here, today. You'd be in one world, but at the same time in another. And that is what I think Ephesians is all about. About the fact that for Christians, tomorrow is already here. Christianity isn't just about living a nice life today and being good to old ladies and to sick kittens and things like that, and then one day later on being transferred to heaven today and tomorrow. No, it's about an overlap. And Christians believe that in some senses, heaven has already started. They have a new life, which is just a foretaste, if you like, of what's to come. And that means they can't live in the same way in this world anymore. Earlier this year I was in Copenhagen. I was on my way to Sweden to do some lectures. I'd never been in Copenhagen before, and Andy and I did what we usually do, which is do all the touristy things and get it out of the way. We took a boat trip round the harbour, which is what you're supposed to do in Copenhagen. I didn't realise at the time that Copenhagen harbour was the place where in 1732 two very brave men set sail on a most bizarre voyage. Their names were Dober and Nitschmann. John Dober was just a potter. David Nitschmann was a carpenter. Nothing very special. But they were people who had a very, very special faith. They'd become Christians a few years before. It had transformed their lives. And as a result, they wanted to give their lives to the cause that they now believed in. And the phrase they used again and again was, "Our Lamb," that's Jesus, "our Lamb has conquered. Let us follow him." What were they going to do? Well, it might sound strange, but they had heard of an island in the West Indies where there were 20,000 slaves who'd been brought from their homes in Africa, thrown into wretched, abject penury, and made to work all day for an atheist landowner who wouldn't even let them hear about the gospel. And they just burned to take at least the good news of Jesus to these slaves. But how could you do it? The landowner had said that no Christian missionary would ever be allowed on his island. And so these two Moravians decided that what they were going to do was, if necessary, sell themselves into slavery and live the rest of their lives here as slaves. Why would you do that? Give your life away like that? Well, it was because basically they believed their life here wasn't the end of the story, that there was more to life than just these few years of existence. Our Lamb has conquered, let us follow him. And they believed that even if it seemed like weakness and defeat to go into slavery, to lose your freedom, what they were doing was actually bringing about a victory which had already been won on the cross. Tomorrow was already here, and so everything had to change in the way that they live today. In actual fact, they didn't have to sell themselves into slavery. They had the effect they wanted, and they were able to stay free men. But that's another story. And this is the way that Jesus taught about tomorrow and today. You see, in Jesus' day, people believed that there were two ages. The Jews talked about this age, the age that we're living in now, and the age to come, which was the day when God would sort everything out. And to most people, there was a discontinuity between the two. We were in this age now, and the age to come was going to be something completely different and separate. However, Jesus taught there was an overlap. That's why, right from the start of his preaching, he was saying, the kingdom of heaven has come very close to you. The kingdom has arrived. It's already here. It's in the world today. And human beings now are living in the overlap of two ages. And Christians are those who are the heirs of the age to come. They'll be living on the victory side in that age. And that means that right now, they share in the victory because tomorrow is already here. Now, that doesn't mean we're in heaven already, in one sense anyhow. It doesn't mean that we've got everything that God's going to give us, not by a long chalk. Eye hasn't seen, ear hasn't heard, it hasn't entered into the heart of man to consider what God has stored up for those who love him. The Bible tells us that. So there's a lot more to come. But already, here and now, Christians have something special going on in their lives. That's why Christians feel so excited about what they've got. It's not just a belief. It's not just an opinion. It's not just a set of values. It's a whole new life. It's the inrush of tomorrow's life into today's world, changing everything. An outpost of the future in this present age. There is nothing bigger or more exciting than that. Let's see how all of this pans out with Ephesians, which is the book that we're going to be talking about for the next 6 weeks. I want to say just two things about Ephesians very quickly this time. And one of them is, it's not really a letter. It's in the collection of letters in the New Testament, along with Romans, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, Thessalonians. All sounds the same, but actually Ephesians is quite different. You see, there's no greetings at the end. Paul usually at the end of a letter that he writes says, "Oh, greet so-and-so, my old friend. Oh, and my fellow warrior so-and-so is just down the road. And then there's that woman who was a tremendous help to me. Remember her too." And he doesn't do that in Ephesians at all. There are no personal greetings. There's very little at the start to say that it's being sent to anybody. Even in verse 1, the words "in Ephesus" are missing from most of the good manuscripts. So we don't know for sure that it was really sent to Ephesus, although it certainly went there, and it was big in Ephesus because it's been given the name Ephesians from the very earliest days. In fact, we've got some old manuscripts, very old ones indeed, which say, Paul, an apostle of Christ Jesus, to the saints in blank and blank. What's that about? Well, the suggestion is that this is a document that was supposed to travel around the churches in the area of Ephesus. You see, Ephesus was a very, very big city, but there were lots of other churches in the area. There were the churches in the Lycus Valley, for instance, with famous names like Colossae, Laodicea, Hierapolis. You find them mentioned in the New Testament again and again. There were the 7 churches of Revelation. Well, actually, Ephesus was one of those, but the others, like Smyrna, modern Izmir, Pergamum, and places like that, were not too far away. And so Paul was writing to an area that was dense in Christian churches, where the gospel had already made a massive impact in just a few decades. And he wanted this letter, it would seem, to go around all of those churches. It's written in a very special style. It's not just written in his normal Greek. It would appear to be written in a style which has been called Asiatic epideictic rhetoric. And what that means basically is it's the way that Ephesians made speeches. There was a style of rhetoric that was famous in the province of Asia, in Asia Minor, where Ephesus was. And many of the great Roman orators, such as Cicero, travelled to Asia Minor to study the local style because it was so powerful and so good. And here in this letter, Paul adopts that style. And he uses it for this particular letter. It's as if somebody nowadays was trying to adopt a local style for getting something across that he wanted to sound culturally relevant to a particular area, like translating the gospel into rap or something like that. When William Carey went as a missionary to India, he made very few converts in the first 10 years, but one of the converts he made was the leading Tamil poet of his generation. And that was important, because Carey couldn't do it, but this guy knew exactly how to put things in Tamil that would entertain and interest people and get through to their thinking and penetrate that Indian mindset. And so the Tamil poets started writing songs and ballads and all sorts of things in Tamil, and soon churches were forming all over the place because people were hearing the gospel in thought forms that they could understand. So I think Paul tries deliberately very hard to write in this style for this letter. You'll find that Ephesians contains 8 very long sentences, for instance, and lots of words which seem to be invented words, which you don't find anywhere else. And that's typical of the epideictic rhetorical style. I better not try saying that too often. But this is the kind of thing that seems to be going on here. And why would he write this letter to these people? Well, because Ephesus was a very great city indeed. After Rome, it was the most important and the biggest in the Roman Empire. Already 100 years before Jesus, there were 250,000 people living there. And you can still today go around the ruins. It's in modern-day Turkey, and see what a wonderful place it actually was. And on the website, we've put a slideshow. You must have a look at that, and they've suggested underneath it some other things you can do, panoramic views of the ruins of Ephesus, and a reconstruction on YouTube of what the city must have looked like. And that gives you an idea of just how big and impressive it actually was. Now, the Christians had made a big impact on Ephesus. We know that Paul was friends with some of the top people in the city administration. You find that in the book of Acts. But the Christians were not too popular, because the whole city was founded around the worship of Artemis, the Roman goddess Diana. And the temple of Artemis stood on the edge of the city, and people came from all over the ancient world to worship there and to buy little silver statues and take them home. And as a result, the city got very wealthy from that kind of thing. And the Christians were very unpopular. One of the things you find in Ephesus that's still there is the auditorium holding 25,000 people, where some of the early Christians were dragged when the silversmiths of Ephesus got annoyed with them. And the stadium was filled to capacity. 25,000 voices, were told, chanting for 2 hours. Great is Diana of the Ephesians. Great is Diana of the Ephesians. And they wouldn't stop until the town clerk silenced them and sent them home. So it wasn't easy being a Christian in that sort of environment.